You are listening to the Solid Listen Podcast Network.
This is what you wanted. You put a joke on your shirt. You're asking for this. That's your fault.
You are listening to Hardly Focused.
That's why I wear no words on my shirt.
You're wearing a shirt right now that has Jawbreaker on it.
I am wearing a Jawbreaker shirt right now.
Would you say you're accident prone?
Hear more at hardlyfocus.com.
We're Hardly Focused. Jack Gill, Nate Fillers, Zach Ward. We're part of the Solid Listen Podcast Network. This band that you're hearing right now is called Heir to Madness. The song is called Ghost Cities. It's off their new album Nightflyers, available on Bandcamp and Spotify. And we welcome to the show Jason Wiscarson from Heir to Madness. Hello, sir.
Hello, thank you. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Now, we had you on a past iteration of this podcast, which is also a current iteration of this podcast, which doesn't sound confusing in the least.
No.
But we had you on the show in 2008.
Long time ago.
Damn.
Zach, you were present for that.
Yeah, okay. So I was like, for the listeners, I've been like super excited to specifically have this interview. And also just to bring back this as a whole segment. So buckle up, guys. We're going to have guests like this as often as possible. But this is really important to me because like back when MySpace was still the thing that everybody was using, and Jack had let me in on this show and I was helping. I just had the random idea, like, what if I reached out to people on MySpace? And, you know, I got a couple people that responded, but the only person that actually, like, really interacted with me was Jason. So I was like, hey, man, do you want to possibly do this show that we're doing? Like, you're not going to get any money. Like, we're just, like, high school kids. But, like,
wait, I'm not getting paid?
Oh,
I thought I was getting paid.
We'll talk later.
So like one of the things that we like to talk about too on Hardly Focus is like, you know, we're all a bit about the continuity. That's why, you know, you look at the episode numbers and they're really high. It's because you're part of the history and the timeline. And I know that like that interview somewhere in like the deep archives that you'll have to like do a Fallout mission to like find at this point, Jack. But it was a really, really cool experience. I wish I remembered all of the conversation, but like part of it was just like, I can't believe this is actually happening. I can't believe I actually reached out to someone that actually wanted to be on this show and wanted to talk to us. So really awesome that suddenly we were on the Solid Listen podcast network. Reached out to Jason because I was thinking, hey, maybe if you want to come back on again, that'd be awesome. And then it just also happened to coincide with I'm actually releasing a new album next month that I've been working on for the last 13 years. It's like
I didn't know that part.
Have aligned.
Wait, you've been working on this for 13 years?
Well, that is a long story.
Well, let's hear it.
13 years worth of story.
Yeah, so I did that album it came out in 2008, and it took me a couple of years to put that together. And I tried to put a band together around that idea of Heir to Madness back then, and it just did not work. I couldn't find the members and all that stuff. So I was like, well, you know, screw it. I'm just going to record this thing myself, and I'll just put it out. And that's what I ultimately did. But I was really bad at recording, really bad at mixing, really bad at all the things involved. So there's some quality issues that I don't like about it, but overall it's fine. And I think it was a really good experience to do that. After that, I again tried to put a band together after it was released, and again, wasn't really able to make it happen. Then sort of life started calling, you know, hey, get a real job type thing. You know, you need to focus on your career, stuff like that I probably really shouldn't have even listened to. But, you know, one thing led to another in jobs and careers. And here we are, like, 15 years later. You know, about a year ago, I was like, man, you know, I'm doing this corporate job and money's fine or whatever. And it's terrible. And I'm not like happy about it. I'm like depressed, whatever. I'm like a creative person. I need to be creating all that stuff. So I was like, well, I'm going to turn this situation around, and I'm going to put music back on the top priority and put sort of job stuff back on the second priority, and I'll make enough to survive or whatever. But other than that, I'm going to focus on, you know, getting this new album done and getting it put out and putting a band together and so on and so forth. And here we are. So released earlier this week. A lot better at mixing and all that stuff now after all these years of kind of piddling around with it. So it sounds a lot better, which I'm happy about. There's room for improvement, I think, but it's pretty good. Yeah, and now I'm putting a band together. I've got all the members except for a drummer. Still have to find a drummer, and I'm working on that. Once I find a drummer, we'll start playing live shows soon, and we'll see how far it can go, I guess.
Nice.
Both Nate and I, our ears perked up when you said you needed a drummer. But you're based in Texas, though.
Yeah.
So kind of a far drive for us.
Well, you fly down here every month and do a practice. Fine, you can do it. It's all right.
Ooh, freaking flyer miles, Jack.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, Jason, with just the length of time that you've been working on the album, which is called Nightflyers, by the way, what is the oldest song on the album? Like when did you write the oldest song on the album?
Yeah, so I've been working on it, you know, on and off for all those years. It wasn't like a continual 13 years of work because I was doing jobs and other type crap.
Oh, trust us, we all understand that one.
Yeah, so I kind of devoted what time I could, and there were times when I was disillusioned with the whole thing, and then months went by where I didn't do anything. Anyway, so you asked what the oldest one is. I think the oldest one probably is Pawns, Rooks, and Kings. I think that's the oldest song that I kind of had as a demo shortly after I put out the album in 2008. It wasn't in the exact form that it's in now, but I had the demo of it then and kind of like worked on it throughout the years off and on. And now this is sort of its final form, I guess.
Nice. And so you did all the instruments, you did all the production. You'd said that when you recorded your first album, that was very challenging to do. Did you find it as challenging with Nightflyers, or just with technology improving, maybe your own experiences improving? Did you find it was just as challenging, or was it a little more streamlined this time around?
I felt like it was just as challenging, actually. I knew more, but I think there was still a large gap of what I needed to learn. So over the past, 9-10 months was a very intense learning period for me because I was determined to get the album done and put it out, and I was determined to have it sound at least halfway decent. And so I really bared down, and hours of work probably per day, every day of the week, on the weekends, even more. I mean, every now and then I would be too exhausted and then I wouldn't do anything on it for a day, but literally that would only last for a day. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do what I did last time and go for months without working on it. So the next day I would be back on it, like, how do I, stupid stuff like, how do I get this kick drum to sound decent? Or how do I, get the guitars to sit so it doesn't sound like they're weird and sticking out of the mix and stuff, just details like that. And just dealing with that stuff months after months after months, and getting help from friends and doing online tutorials and YouTube videos and, et cetera, et cetera. And so I got to a point where I felt like it was good enough to actually release.
Now,
yeah, I felt like it was just as hard, just sort of different things, right?
Now, were you using a home studio, or did you rent studio space?
I did not rent any studio space. I have a small space here that I used. So yeah, I didn't rent anything. I recorded all the parts here, mostly in this room that I'm in now. There was a few parts that were recorded in other houses when I lived in different places, but those are mostly like little guitar parts here and there. The bulk of it got recorded right here in this room.
Okay, nice. Actually, all three of us here, fellow musicians, and what I'm very curious about is what equipment you used to record this album. Guitars, bass, like what brands, models are we working with?
I do want to say too, before you answer that question, it's really cool. Like, since I've listened to Citadel for on and off for the last several years, it's really cool to see the progression, how much you've polished from where you were, and I can hear a lot of different influences too. And I do have another question about something you mentioned when we were talking before, but equipment question, and also like what really changed that made you polish to that? Was it really just the equipment?
I'll go over what I used real quick to get that out of the way. I'm not a huge gear head. I have lots of musician friends who are very focused on the gear, and I'm not super, interested in that. I want it to be able to do what it's supposed to do. And I want it to be nice, and I want it to play well and all that. But I used, mostly for this album, I used my Ibanez acoustic guitar for any acoustic parts. I've got an Ibanez 5-string bass that I use. It's one of the cheaper SDGR versions. It's not even like a super awesome bass or anything.
It does the job.
Yeah, it did fine. And then a couple of different guitars. I used mostly an ESP E2 or I2. Man, so I told you I'm not a gearhead at all. I can actually go get it and look, but it's not even actually my guitar. I have another friend, a longtime friend. He's got a bunch of guitars, amps, and he just lets me use stuff whenever I want it. So a lot of the guitars, that guitar and a guitar I used to have is on the album that I literally can't even remember what it was right now. But this ESP was on most of it. I've got a VHT Pitbull for distortion parts that I use most of the time. Some of the distortion parts are a software-based thing from Neural DSP. I don't know if y'all have heard of that. They make like software versions of amps, and you just plug your guitar into the thing, and the technology is really improved, and it sounds really good. So the one I like to use is based on sort of Gojira's sound. Do y'all know who Gojira is?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and it sounds really, really good. So I've been using that, and it's kind of a mixture with that and the actual real amp. But that's it. Other than that, I have a Roland JDXI keyboard here, which I used for some of it, and also used a lot of software-based instruments like stuff from Native Instruments, like keyboard parts and piano stuff. That's all virtual. Other than that, and my voice. That's pretty much all there is.
Dude, it sounds polished.
I'm curious what your dog choice is.
Yeah, I laugh because my friends are kind of annoyed with me because I've used Cakewalk forever, since way back in since back to that first podcast that we did, and I recorded that album on Cakewalk. I also recorded this album on Cakewalk.
Wow!
And so I've stuck with that. I use different ones now for different things. I can use Ableton Live for some of the live stuff. I'm also a drummer for a different band, and I use Ableton Live for that. But for recording at home, I just still use Cakewalk. It's free. It does the job.
They all do it. They all do things. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. I always am just curious because there's such a divide between people who use Ableton and FL Studios, and it's just Logic. And it's just everybody fights. I did an album in GarageBand. I get it.
Yeah, for sure. I think they all have their strengths. I've used a couple of them, but I just keep falling back to Cakewalk because I already know how to do everything in Cakewalk, and I don't feel like learning all the ins and outs of another and they're all super complicated. Even Cakewalk is super complicated. I just happen to already know how to use it because I've used it all these years. So
that's me with Audacity. I've been using Audacity since 2006. I've used Pro Tools. I've used Adobe Audition, and I can't do anything else. I get it. I know how to use them. I know why musicians, record producers swear by Pro Tools. No, I will jerry rig a studio to get Audacity in there because I know how to do it. And I've done it before when I worked in radio. I've done it because I'm like, this is my comfort zone. In fact, they updated Audacity recently. I'm using a new version of it. And it's like, there's just enough changes to it that I'm just angry because I'm out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But
I was going to say that I went to school for sound design. And for 4 years, they had us learning Pro Tools. They had us learning the ins and outs, everything about it, like all the tricks and all of that. The second I graduated, I was like, not ever using Pro Tools ever again. It's the most frustrating program. It's so like annoying. And I immediately went to Ableton. I was like, oh, this is much nicer. It's not as professional. It doesn't have as many tracks, but I hate it. I hate Pro Tools.
So, Jason, drums, is that your main instrument?
No, I'd probably say guitar is my main instrument. But I try to be somewhat proficient at all of them so I can, continue to write stuff myself and record it and all that stuff. Now, after Heir just gets a full band and other people start recording, I don't know, if I'm going to be doing all the parts or not. That's kind of up in the air. But yeah, I would say probably guitar is the main one.
Okay. So Nightflyers is out. It's on Bandcamp. It's on Spotify. Is there anywhere else people can find it?
Yeah, any of the major streaming services. Apple, I don't know if you said that. Amazon. Anywhere you could stream or buy an MP3 off the internet, it's probably there.
Awesome. I'm very obviously biased. I went with the two that I'm always gravitating towards. Bandcamp.
Yeah, no, understandable.
So
I mostly use MySpace.
Zach Ward.
So I was curious. After we were talking about all of the instruments, what are your vocal influences?
It's a really good question. I think I was hugely influenced by Maynard Keenan of Tool. I think that's probably apparent in what my voice sounds like. Yes. I didn't really try to sound like him, but that just ended up happening. I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan. Do y'all know that band Opeth, O-P-E-T-H?
Yep.
Yes. So
Zach.
Oh, we're both right. We're both right. Fuck yeah.
Steve Wilson. Yeah. Yeah. We'll go on.
So you're right, Steve Wilson. But I was going to say about Opeth, his singing voice is so amazing. I love his singing voice.
That's so good.
That's definitely influenced how I word things and how I construct I think what I'm singing. And then you also mentioned Steven Wilson, which is another one of my I call them the big three of things I continually go back to listen to. I love a lot of bands, obviously, but those are kind of the big three for me. And Steven Wilson, again, when he does a certain type of singing and vocal production, it just sounds amazing. Yeah. And so I think with those three, with a smattering of some other things, kind of, make up, how I'm sounding. Oh, also, Ian Kinney from Carnival. I don't know if y'all have heard of that.
Yeah. I love them. They're good too.
Yeah, he's also a super amazing singer. So he probably plays a role too. Yeah, but I think those are probably my main influences.
I listened to Nightflyers earlier and just every single song I listen to, I'm just thinking to myself, sounds like vocally, it sounds like Tool. It sounds like Maynard. And you do have now. I hope I'm not off base on this, but it sounds like you're messing around with time signatures too.
There are some songs that get a little funky with time signatures. Yeah,
there you go. So yeah, I can definitely hear Tool and Maynard in there. So
in particular, track number 6, that I had to re-listen to that a couple times today because I love the way that it picks up and charges like a cavalry, that's the kind of energy that the build up to me has, and I like the way that it crescendos into that and then goes back down a little bit in intensity and then just goes back to that. I don't know, I'm not using any kind of musical terms in real, but I feel like you get where I'm going.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank
you.
So with the project being on hold for a while, obviously, we all had to go through the pandemic a few years ago, and I know a lot of bands used that time to write, record, resurrect things that hadn't been touched in a long time, just because there was nothing else they could do. They couldn't tour. They really couldn't do anything. Would you say that the pandemic affected your musical drive? Did it jumpstart your desire to get back into Heir to Madness?
I would say no. I think it was sort of the same through that period. I didn't feel any change in the atmosphere of what I wanted to do musically, or do it more intensely or less intensely or anything like that. I think that big change for me happened, earlier in 2022. I don't know, 9-10 months ago or 11 months ago. I don't remember the exact time. And I don't think it was with respect to the pandemic or anything. I think I just made a decision that, my life is sucking without me actually focusing on stuff that I creatively care about as a being that exists in the universe. I don't know how weird that sounds, but if I'm not focusing on this and I'm not trying to complete this and do this creative thing, then I feel like, what am I doing?
What's the point? Yeah, dude. Speaking to the right people, I'm 100% there right now. I'm just like, people want me to do certain things, but if that's not what I'm passionate about, like what's the point?
Yeah,
you got to do what you're passionate about, because otherwise people are going to know that you're just like faking it. I don't know.
And then you've also spent that time of your life doing something you aren't passionate about, and that sucks.
That's really bad. Yeah.
And then at some point you're going to die. So then you spent that time not making the best use of the time you have, and that also sucks.
Yeah, I heard it's really hard to make music when you're dead.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
It's like no one's figured it out yet, but they're working on it.
I like he says yet.
John Cage is close because he has this one. I don't know if you're familiar with the thing that he set up where the song takes what is it, like 1,000 years to play?
Oh yeah.
But anyway. I
forgot about that.
Yeah, a lot of people did, because it's so slow. Still going though.
What would you say on Nightflyers? What would you say is the most personal song for you, Jason?
Wow. I think they're all deeply personal to me. If I had to pick one, I'd probably say the title track to Nightflyers. That's one I'd probably have to say.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of tell, like, I don't know. I feel like the way that album starts is very, very, like, I don't know how else to describe it. It's just like driving, and like I can just feel that there is a lot behind it. So I was curious about that song, and also was curious kind of what you were kind of going through mentally that, like, even led to you making Citadel, and in particular, like what you were going through, like kind of helped you make Arbiter of Somnolence, because that's one of my favorite songs on the album.
I think a lot of stuff, I think back then and now, it's really a lot of the same stuff. It's trying to understand, living and life and how I fit into that, and trying to understand my place and how this sort of society that we live in, and like capitalism and the military and war and like racism and like all these different things, and trying to be like, figure out and explain to myself, why is it like this? And do I agree with this? I mean, obviously I don't agree with it, but how did it get like this? And is it like this because, people are ignorant, which is usually the case. And so I think I'm actually, a lot of my music is kind of dark and kind of has that feel to it, like sorrow, dark, whatever. I like that kind of music. It's really the opposite of what I'm like in person. Like, I'm actually a very happy, whatever type of guy. But I do think deeply about this stuff, and then it comes out, I think, in the music, and I'm thinking about, where do I fit in with this stuff? Why are things like they are? Why is it necessary for someone, like when it comes to, working on this album and taking a career path that I didn't want to take really, and all that stuff, and thinking about, why is it necessary for me to spend 40 or 50 hours a week and being exhausted just to survive at a minimal level. Like, why is that necessary for anyone to do that? And so thinking about those kinds of things and translating that into some kind of artwork, I think helps me process it. And I think that's where the prior album came from, although I was in a sort of earlier place in my life. And then also this album, but this album, I think lyrically, it's deeper and has more breadth just because of all that experience I've had in the last 15 years.
Do we have any bonus?
Hopefully that makes sense. Sorry, what?
Oh, it does. Yeah. Do we have any bonus tracks or anything unreleased from the album, or is this it?
There's a couple songs that really didn't get finished to my liking. I don't really want to release something until I'm like, okay, everything's checked off. I like everything. I like all these parts. I like what it's doing at all of these various junctures in the songs. And there are some songs who didn't really make the cut. And I already had, it's already an hour plus. It's like an hour and 10 minutes or something worth of music. And so I was like, well, I should go ahead and call it done here. And then I'll continue working on these other songs maybe for the next album.
I have a question. I don't know how to do the hand thing like Zach did. So I'm just going to awkwardly just be like, I have a question.
See him on the video just with his hand raised, and he's going to do the thing that like kids would do back in the fifth grade.
Shyly,
they're propping it up and then like waving.
Nate does comedy.
I do comedy. Thank you. I was curious if you could maybe walk us through the process of like the how you come up with songs. Like, what comes first? Is it like the vocal, the lyrics? Like, do you like have a guitar part first, or like what starts this whole thing, and how do you manage it along the way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with me, 9 times out of 10, it starts with me just like noodling around on the guitar. Okay. And I'll be playing around with chords or some kind of melody or something like that. And I'll go, something will hit in my mind. I'll be like, oh, I like that. And I'll continue working with that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have this part. Does this sound like it's a chorus? Does it sound like it could be a verse? Does it sound like it could be a hook? What does it sound like? And I'll kind of decide where that part should go. And then I build the rest of the song around that, depending on what it needs. Like, oh, it needs a chorus, so let me figure that out. And so then I'll figure that out. And so it usually starts that way. And then after that, I will do a sort of demo recording in Cakewalk. Do like a demo recording and maybe throw some drums on there or some other guitar parts, maybe throw some bass on there just to play around.
Like programmed drums, or like?
Yeah, at this stage, I use like programmed drums. Gotcha. Or I've got a electronic kit, so I'll use that to like mess around.
Okay. Cool.
And I'll get some stuff on there, and I'll try to see like, where is it going? Do I like it? Should it change or whatnot? And I get it to a place where not vocally, like there's no vocals at this point, but do I like the music itself? And I may noodle around with like some melodies with my voice. But yeah, once I find a place where I like all the music, then I'm like, okay, yes, I've decided to make this a song. I will, shoot out a version of it to carry around with me, and I'll play it in the car, or I'll play it when I'm like taking walks or a jog or whatever it is. And I kind of just listen to it and just wait for something like inspiration to strike. I don't know. Nice. I just have to listen to it over and over again to where I'm hearing like a vocal melody come to mind. I'm like, oh, it could sound like this. And then generally I'll have a melody in mind first, and then I take that melody and transport that into like actual words. And that's pretty much how it happens almost every time. There's a little variation like in the steps. Like sometimes I'll write stuff on the acoustic and then go ahead and write some lyrics right there to it because I know that I like it and I know that I want to make a song out of it. But yeah, basically that's it.
Cool. I can tell that you definitely think about like the melodies of like the vocal lines as opposed to just like whatever. You layer it so well. And yeah, it's like its own instrument. Like I feel like a lot of bands just kind of, they're like, I've written the lyrics and everything, I just have to sing them. It sounds like you've tried out a lot of different variations and different paths, and it definitely comes through. So
thank you. And I want to make sure that outside of the lyrics, everything sounds good to listen to. Otherwise, I don't want to listen to it, and it's my music. So if I don't want to listen to it, then who the hell else is going to want to listen to it? So I like to try to get all of the instruments, including what's happening with the voice, to a place that I like before I really start committing to writing actual lyrics. because I don't like to write lyrics and then have to go back and change them because they don't fit something that I needed to change before because it didn't sound good and I failed to change it at the time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Do we have any collaborations on the album with other bands, other musicians?
No, this is all me this time, all fully myself.
Okay. Are you open to collaborations, or do you prefer?
I'm open.
Okay.
I've done some stuff with other people before, mostly for their music. But I'm not opposed to it. You know, the like I was saying, I'm finding members for this band currently, and so I have a longtime friend. His name is Gary, and he's going to play guitar. And he just sent me over a song today. That's an older song, and he's like, "Hey, remember when I sent you this a long time ago? I think it could be really good for Heir. It's kind of in the same vein. It sounds similar to the other music, and it's not something that works for the project he's in." So I'm like, yeah, it sounds great. We can definitely collab on that. And so I think there will be collabs with definitely people in the band, and I'm open to it otherwise too. It just, if it's the right fit and everyone likes what's going on, sure.
Touring prospects. I know you're trying to set up a live band and take this on the road. And you're based out of Texas, right?
Right. Dallas.
So would we be starting local out there, or would we be going regional? Do you have any immediate plans after you get the band up and running?
So I have very limited experience when it comes to, taking a band live and doing that whole thing. And so I'm letting the universe kind of make my path to that because I don't know what to do. I have a lot of friends who locally, who are musicians and in bands and stuff. And so I already know that I can kind of lean on them to help me get shows and crap like that. And they will. So I imagine it's definitely going to start locally. Hopefully people like what they hear and enjoy it. And hopefully at some point we can get on the bill with a larger band and get kind of tagged along on like a regional tour, so on and so forth, until we work up to being on tour ourselves and whatnot. But I don't know how long of a road that is. But in any case, that's the road we're going to travel. It doesn't really matter to me if it happens in a month or it happens in 3 years. There's nothing else, like per what I was saying before with my new decision about focusing on this. There's nothing else I really want to do. Even if it doesn't ever end up in touring, I'll still do it.
Nice.
My only advice for you is if you ever get offered to open for Tool, don't do it. Tool fans are really tough.
Yeah.
They never like anything.
No, that's true. They're very picky. I'm a Tool fan myself, so I know.
Yeah, it's always like whatever band opens for Tool is doomed.
Right.
So I got two things. So first, it's starting to become more common to when bands are performing and they have their opening acts. It's starting to become common that the opening act isn't necessarily a musical act. Sometimes you'll have a comedian warm the crowd up with some laughs. So we've got the perfect opening act right here, Nightflyers.
Oh, hi. Yeah, that's a weird thing that's happening. A lot of metal bands are asking friends of mine to open up their sets with comedians. What's going on?
Let's buy a plane ticket. Let's go.
Wait. I got some jokes.
All right.
Yeah, before the Pixies reunited in 2004, I think it was when Frank Black was doing solo tours, the drummer for the Pixies he has a magic show. So the opening act was the magic show.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'd pay for that. I'd pay just for the magic show. Frank Black, whatever.
Leave after the magic show.
Yeah, exactly.
Most do.
When I worked in radio, when I worked in promotions, aka the street team, I remember a buddy of mine and I were in New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire, and Tool was performing up there. Couldn't tell you what year it was. Maybe it was 2009, maybe it was 2010, but Tool's performing up there. And I guess Maynard drove himself up to the show from New Jersey and got stuck in traffic. So the show started, I think, maybe 45 minutes late. And our thing, part of our job was, for the most part, just sitting outside the venue, inside the radio station van, twiddling our thumbs. But we would have to hand out radio station swag as the crowd is dispersing after the show. So we see a couple people emerge from the venue, so we get out, and they're approaching us, and they're huffing and puffing, and I'm like, "Hey guys, how's the show? And they're like, Maynard drove himself up here, started 45 minutes late, and they sucked, and they just sound terrible, and everyone's pissed off. And I look at Warren, I'm like, we should leave, because this is not going to go well. And sure enough, there were a lot of angry people leaving that venue. I guess it just wasn't a good night for Tool, but going back to how Tool fans are, they did not respond well to it. They at least let them finish the show, but I can only imagine people were out for blood.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds hard, man.
I mean, I would be too if I was waiting, almost 20 years for a new album.
Sure. And then 45 minutes for the show to start.
Yeah. Speaking of lengths, thank you for letting me tell my story. Speaking of lengths, so most of the songs on Nightflyers are about 7 minutes long, 8 minutes long. I think the shortest song on there is just a hair under 6 minutes. Yep. Is it challenging to write a song that length? Were you challenging yourself to write a song of that general length, or did you actually find you were trying to constrain yourself at 10 minutes or less?
I laugh because this is an ongoing joke between me and people who know me. So I just write long songs. I don't try to. It's just what happens. I have to really be concise in order to get a song under 6 minutes. I have a goal for myself that on the next album, I'm going to write a song that's 4 minutes long. And so I'm going to try to do that just for fun of trying to do it. But no, that's just what I'm naturally writing a song. I don't know what happens exactly, but it ends up being like 6+ minutes. I don't do it on purpose. I'm not trying to do it necessarily. But yeah, it just happens that way. I don't really have an explanation.
Now forgive my ignorance. Do we have physical pressings of this album, or is it purely digital?
For right now, it's just digital.
Okay.
May have physical pressings at some point, but not yet.
With the lengths of the songs on here, because I actually didn't do the math, but do you have any concerns about not being able to fit the full album onto a CD?
Yeah, you can fit it. I did some research before I decided to include that last track. But yeah, it can fit. Yeah, I made sure because I was like, well, I might want to do physical pressings at some point, so I better make sure it's not too long.
Little Deaths, by the way, that's the longest track on the album. That's 10 minutes and 29 seconds long. And I'm sure you knew this. If you don't, I'll be surprised. But I guess Little Death is a cleaner term for orgasm.
I was aware of that. I'm not using it in that sense for this song. Although, I mean, maybe. I don't know. I like to leave the songs up to the individual interpretation of the person. But for me, this song is about ego death. Like every growth is really about ego death, and every day it's like it's a little death or something else that you're letting go of in order to grow or whatever. So that's kind of what the theme of that song is about.
Okay. Zach, I saw you having a medical episode up in the corner of my screen when I asked the Little Death question, and I couldn't tell if you were excited or doing the stop talking, what's wrong with you motion, but I'll turn it over to you.
I guess it was like a little bit of both, but not really. I was actually curious about this myself, so I was excited that you asked that question. Because I actually, since I now have this thing in my hand and remember that, I can literally look up and find answers to anything I want. And, it's funny how often we forget that we can do that. But I was curious myself because I figured I know that there's other interpretations of it. And as I'm reading, because, what you were going for is actually the original French, because it's a French term. That was the original French meaning. It's like those little deaths, those things that shock you, that freeze you in that moment. And there's also the terminology that I'm also familiar with is when someone goes through something where that literally kills a part of them. That's also another way of referring to a little death. But what I find interesting is, it's kind of weird. I'd like to look it up etymologically, if that's the right term, why that phrase eventually became to be mixed with sex. There's some weird mental connection there between sex and death, life and creation and destruction. Like there's some duality there, and I Tool fans also love duality as a concept. So like it's really funny how that it just ends up being interwoven because everything is connected, man.
It's true. No, I have a little bit of information about that actually. I don't know this, super in-depth details, but I think there is a version of like mysticism that is centered around sex. And I think one of their sort of tenets is that, the orgasm or the sexual experience or whatever can be a way to attain, new states of consciousness or whatever. And that has to do with like the orgasm and all of that stuff. I don't know a lot about it, but I do know that there is a connection there. Although what I've said just now is everything I know about it. So I don't know anything else.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I can't remember if it's Tibetan ascetic monks, but there's like certain there's some kind of like monk aesthetic lifestyle where like they believe that, in particular, like when you orgasm, you're losing some sort of vital energy, and that's the reason why they stay celibate. The other question though I have that I found interesting was like song number 3. I believe it's Gottfried All Night. Now I was just like, okay, Gottfried. Now, when I first think Gottfried, of course, and when I searched it, is the same thing came out, Gilbert Gottfried, which I figured was not who you were talking about. So I was like digging more, and I discovered Gottfried. I'm not gonna pronounce this right. Wilhelm Leibniz. Is that who this song is referencing?
This is actually referencing Gilbert Gottfried, actually.
I knew it. Zach coming in here all educated, taking it seriously. Oh, I knew that was coming.
Yeah, me too. I could feel it from a mile away.
It's not quite as deep as your the second one.
That's beautiful. All right. So what is that song? Ben, I guess.
So
it's about the Aflac duck. It's about how Gilbert got screwed.
So this is another one of my more mysticism things. This is about me and my own egotism, my own ego, right? And I'm really talking to it. I'm saying that you've got something to say about everything. You've got an opinion. You've got a judgment. And I'm basically saying that you're loud and annoying, like nails on a chalkboard, or like Gottfried talking to you all night because he's got kind of an annoying voice. Actually, I think he's really funny, but I'm talking about that sort of thing. Like, I wish my mind sometimes would just shut up and stop doing what it's doing, what minds do, judge everything and tell you you're not good enough and tell you that you should do this or that, or, we all deal with this crap. So that's what that song is about. So yeah, it was actually Gilbert Gottfried.
That is
That's
so crazy
awesome.
because I just decided to read up about this dude, and so I'm also like big into theater and musicals and stuff. And when I was reading about this guy, he apparently was like one of the philosophers that was at the end of the rationalism and idealism eras. I don't remember a whole lot about philosophy, but I know that was important. And he ended up being given a very bad reputation by the end of his by the time that he died. People were just talking bad about him. And I know Voltaire actually created a book called Candide, which is actually referencing him. And Candide is actually a very, it's a satirical musical. It's actually one of my favorite ones. But I just find it really interesting because I can see a lot of parallels between just that and what you described, because it wasn't until after this dude died that people actually started taking him seriously. They really just kind of looked at everything that he was doing, and all of his works were basically misattributed. And it wasn't until I guess some other philosophers that came afterwards. I'm not even going to try reading or saying any of their names out loud, but I just find it interesting because, again, it's weird how just things.
You were saying everything is connected.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I agree with you. Yeah. I need to look up that guy.
has a question about music in general. How do you feel music is going these days? With the fact that like everybody's able to create it, do you find that to be like a positive thing, or is it more of like does it just get in your way? Or like obviously it's great that we all can create music, but it's also like very frustrating that anyone can make music. So I was just wondering what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, I think it's great actually. I know that like you were saying, anyone is able to make music because of that fact. I know I've heard stuff just scrolling through Spotify or something that those people would never have made that music before if that wasn't the case, and I would never had a chance to hear that. So I think it's really good. I think the problem is not that everyone can make music. So there's a huge amount of music out there to go through, and everyone's vying to, make money with it and survive, and everyone's trying to have their say and all that stuff. I don't think that's the actual problem. I think that it's good that everyone can make music, and, I don't think I have heard friends or people that I know say that, there's just so much bad music or whatever. And I think, that's a judgment call. That's a value-based judgment. And no matter how good or bad you think music is, so, that person at least likes it because they made it and they decided it was good enough to put on Spotify or whatever, right? Some people probably like it. So I don't think it's bad that exists. I think that society needs a better mechanism for making sure that people who want to engage in art can be supported while they do that. And that's what I think that it's good that people can make music, and they are, and I think that's a good thing, but it's also, it outlines a bigger problem of, how do all these people who want to do art and stating that they should be able to do art, how do they feed themselves at the end of the day when there isn't any money, it's hard anyway.
It's hard to get
noticed, that there's not any. Yeah, it's hard to get noticed. It's hard to get paid. It's hard to do things. And I think that's a failure of how society is set up.
I agree too, and it's also really frustrating that people tend to seem to like the stuff that's already been done, like the same 4 chords and like simplicity sells and everything like that. And
yeah,
I'm curious if I'm almost wondering if we're gonna have like a breaking point where like people are just so sick of like all these pop songs. Like I like pop songs, I like pop music, I think it's well done, but I wonder if sometime in the future we're all going to be sick of every song sounding the same, and then every band is going to gravitate towards sounding like Igor or something like that. Just something completely. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with Igor, but they're they're special to me.
Yeah, they're interesting.
They're not for the faint of heart because they're just all over the place, but they're definitely like pushing the envelope,
I think there's always going to be this sort of pop music, like simple pop and like simple country. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I think it's just a facet of how people are. You have a whole smattering, a large group of people who listen to sort of basic music. Like you were saying, with the 4 chords and everything sounds good, everything, there's nothing clashing, there's no confusion on the time signatures, that sort of stuff. I don't think that's wrong necessarily or anything bad. I think it's just how humans are. And I think that there will be, this constant progression we're seeing, like, oh, rock is big now. And then, I don't know, 10 years later, oh, rap is making a huge resurgence. Then like 10 years later, oh, it's EDM. And it's 10 years later, it's something else. And I think that rolling thing of what's popular will continue. But I think what's really cool about anyone making music is that you have more of those people who are stepping outside the box, like Igor and other people, making really interesting, unique sounds and putting them on a record and making songs out of them. And although Igor is not something I listen to every day because I feel like I might go crazy.
It's a lot.
But you can't say it's not interesting. And
it's very interesting.
Maybe it helps give someone, maybe it helps me go, I heard Igor do a really weird thing on this song. I'm not going to do exactly what they did, but I bet I could take something that they did and kind of manipulate it to make my music more interesting. And then you have like hundreds of thousands of people doing that.
Well put.
Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, like I don't know, you were talking about like bands with unique sounds, and I'm just remembering Animal Collective, which I don't know if you are if you've ever heard of them before, Jason.
I have.
Yeah, so like what I love about them is they're actually you know, I believe were born from Massachusetts. They were all, I believe, went to Berkeley and then they dropped out. And they formed that group. And I really, really wish I got a chance to see any of those concerts, because everything that I hear about those concerts is that they were just like magical, mystical experiences. But like, I really like bands like that. And I was listening to the last episode, Jack, and you guys are referencing college and like, you know, how we've kind of, you know, it's one of those things now where probably shouldn't even really do it unless you 100% know what exact path you need to burn yourself out into to do the career that you want, and hope that when you get halfway through, you still want to do it. You know, it's the way the education system is now. But like, I love, they had a specific song where they simply say, you don't have to go to college. And I always think about that song, because there's a lot of like societal notions that we end up kind of perpetuating only because it's what's, you know, what one person has said to us, or like a big group of people have said. And I find it very interesting too, when we talk about fandoms, when we talk about, you know, our Tool fans are like this, you know, I've been part of so many different fandoms, and I've noticed themes with things happening, and it makes me think, okay, so like on a bigger picture, it seems like when you get enough people thinking or moving in one direction, there's this weird thing that happens where everybody kind of levels out and rises in peaks of intensity of emotional reactions to stuff. And it is just very interesting that music tends to bring a lot of these observations out of us. Comedy brings a lot of these observations out of us. You know, acting, you know, talking, doing a talk show or podcast radio show thing brings these kinds of observations out of us. And I kind of err on the side of feeling like you, these are just kind of patterns in society. Like this is like society breathing in some way, like this contraction and whatever the opposite of that is, again, because the word is eluding me. But like, yeah. So like, I don't know, like what your take is on all of that, because I was going to ask a question, but that ended up being a very long tangent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with what you said. I think one thing I'll actually add is, I think those music genres that are more pop or more simple or whatnot, I think it's necessary that they exist, because that's the bed, right? It's almost the foundation or the bed of everything else. Even stuff like Igor, right? I mean, if you didn't have the other stuff that's pop and you just heard Igor in a vacuum, you would be like, I don't even know what I'm hearing. And so you have to have a contextual field to say, oh, I understand what Igor is as compared to Coldplay or whatever. And so it gives you context to go, hey, this is interesting. Whereas I don't want to say Coldplay's not interesting, because I actually really like Coldplay, but I don't know, some other band that's supposedly not interesting. But again, those are all just people's opinions. But this whole thing is a contextual field where you need one to have the other one. You can't have the other one without the other one to compare it to.
Zach, it's really interesting that you mentioned Animal Collective, because I saw they were in the news, the music news earlier today.
Oh, nice.
They supposedly in 2000 recorded a cover of Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, and they just today released it, I guess.
They just today got the rights to it.
They're riding the coattails of that TikTok sensation from a couple of years ago. But yeah, they're reissuing their 2000 album Spirit. They're gone, Spirit, they're vanished, and it's going to be part of I believe it's part of a bonus EP that's going to be part of the reissue.
Oh, hell yeah.
So very, very funny that you mentioned them. I have some of it queued up if you want to hear it. I've never been an Animal Collective fan myself. They have a song called Floridada, which makes me want to stab my ears with a screwdriver.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I respect the hustle. Yeah, I'm gonna fire this off. I'm gonna just play a couple seconds of it because I am curious. Anytime anyone tackles Fleetwood Mac, I'm always curious, just like what we're gonna get out of it. So I'm curious now. So here's Animal Collective with Dreams. That's it. That's all I can.
Wait,
take.
was that Animal Collective or was that Fleetwood Mac? I couldn't tell.
Oh, Nate.
Well, there you go.
They're fun.
Thanks, Animal Collective.
They do stuff.
Yes, they do stuff. That's, I was actually just gonna say that, like, Animal Collective is one of those bands where, like, I feel like I have to be in, like, the right phase of my life to interpret one of their albums.
Right phase of something.
Exactly.
Hopped up on
Jason,
Goofballs.
do you have any plans of doing any covers? Like if you had
not
to,
really.
like what would you be interested in? Because I'm right there with you. Covers are, but I'm just curious if like you ever had that drive.
Yeah. I have had the thought that it might be cool to do stuff. I would probably, if someone told me I had to do it or I would get shot in the leg or something, I would probably cover something poppy from the 80s, like something from Tears for Fears maybe. I really love Tears for Fears.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool in your style.
Yeah, a lot of folks remake some of these 80s songs, so I'd be treading on ground probably that's already been treaded, like doing something like Aha or what's that band that does Red Skies at Night, Red Skies at Night. Oh, what band is that?
Oh, I should know this. I'm a disgrace to anyone that's ever listened to my podcast.
We have the internet. We can look it up.
The Terminator. Yeah, that's it. No, The Fix.
What? Oh yeah, The Fix. Yes.
The Fix.
You threw me with the Terminator. But yeah, The Fix. Yeah, something like that I would probably cover. Because I think you could take that stuff and, I don't know, update it a little bit. But I like those songs so much, I wouldn't be changing it that much.
Yeah. I hear ya.
Like, I'm not kidding. So I looked up Red Skies at Night and now, by the way, when I say the Terminator, it's because when we're trying to think of something, when the question is, oh, who did that thing? What was that thing? And I just always default to the Terminator because it usually helps fill the silence for however long it takes to do a Google search. But I do a Google search for Red Skies at Night. The Fix comes up, and one of the results is the song to footage from Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So I wasn't far off.
Huh.
Like Zach said, everything's connected.
Yeah, have you guys ever seen the movie The Matrix?
Is that the one with Will Smith?
It has a Smith in it.
There's a lot of Smiths in it. But what about the Matrix?
I was just saying, like, there's so many instances where I'm like, now I'm not saying we live in a simulation.
I'm telling you, dude. I'm telling you, Jason. You should really have him open up for you when you go on.
I'm all about that kind of joke. Not saying we don't either.
Well, Zach, any final thoughts here before we wrap this up?
I would just say that my personal philosophy as like, I don't really ascribe to any one religion or anything. I consider myself more of a Zenist spiritualist, if anything. I've always kind of felt like everything exists on a spectrum. Regardless of whatever it is, there is a spectrum of it. whether it's your taste in music, your taste in food, colors, machinery, technology. It's one of the reasons why we've had those conversations about society, like, and the things going on now, as crazy as it is. There is a lot of there's just, I don't know, it just kind of feels like we're kind of going through a weird natural ebb and flow, and kind of ride the wave. There's really no way to do in it. That's just kind of the way that life is, and just trying to be awake and aware enough to actually take it when it's in front of you.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's nicely said.
Thanks, Zach.
Yeah.
And Nate, any final thoughts from you?
Now, I'm not saying that we don't live. No. No, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, Jason. I dig the stuff that you do, and I actually appreciate you putting out the concept of, like, we need to follow through with what we want to do, because I'm in a position right now where, of course, life is pushing me in a direction where I'm like, oh, I'm not really that passionate about that, but everybody's like, that's what's going to work for you. And I'm like, but if it works for you, what's the point if you hate it, or if you don't really love it? Like, it's challenging. So just having somebody kind of reiterate that was kind of helpful to keep in mind. Is you got to do what you're passionate about, and the world is going to always push you in certain directions, and it's not necessarily telling you that you need to stop or you need to focus on other things. It's just how things go sometimes. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about stuff like that.
Yeah, man. I think that, I think it's funny that Zach mentioned Zenist, because in the past little while I've really been into Zen meditation. And so I think that's doing that stuff, that daily practice of meditation, has really helped sort of flip the script on how I'm viewing and living my own life in the past year or so. And I think that I think the stuff that you're passionate about, that you feel passionate about, I think that passion is a signal, from the universe of, hey, pay attention to this. Like, this is what you should be focusing on. You're passionate about it. There's a reason you're passionate about it. And when you ignore that or choose to do something else, like I did for so many years, the result is suffering. And so I think that if you commit to what you're passionate about, whatever that is for you or anyone, I think the universe goes, oh shit, he's actually focusing on this. Let's get behind him, and let's make sure that stuff is taken care of and that he has food to eat. And, we set the path for him taking these next steps and all of that stuff. I feel like the universe really gets behind you and helps. I don't know. That sounds kind of woo woo, but that's kind of how I feel about it, honestly.
It sounds like you have a nice universe. My universe is usually like, hey, how can we get him to stop? Let's make it as difficult as possible.
Nice. Thanks, Nate. Jason, if you could have any one song from Nightflyers played on the Solid Listen Podcast Network, which one would it be?
Whoa. I like them all. I don't know that I could even pick one. I would probably say that we mentioned Godfried earlier. I think that one is a good intro to the album. So yeah, I would pick that one.
All right. Well, we will have that coming up for you. The album is called Nightflyers. It's available on wherever you get your digital music, including Bandcamp, Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Music. The band is called Heir to Madness. He is Jason Wiscarson. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.